Welcome, everyone. We're suffering Smallville. This is season 2, episode 13. It is Suspect, or Who Shot Mr. Luther, as you might refer to it as, because someone shoots Lionel Luther in the opening scene. Jonathan is the obvious suspect, not just because he hates Lionel Luther, but because he's found with a gun in his hand and a bottle of booze, all suspicious like. And the episode is then about sort of piecing together what actually happened. And we get a kind of a Rashomon kind of thing where we get more suspects as the episode goes on, and we see the murder play out differently each time, ending with the same gunshots. You see Lionel get shot and fall to his death 5 times in total.
That's not true. He only falls to his death 4 times. He gets shot 5 times, but one of the times it cuts away before he falls.
Oh, forgive me. Okay, yeah.
I was really disappointed that one time we didn't see him fall.
Yeah. So, in some ways, this might be the best episode of the season.
I don't know if it's objectively the best, but it's definitely the one I had the most fun with. It might also be objectively the best.
It's got some moments that I thought were laugh out loud funny, and it's got a few other things, but just in the sense that it sets up its thing. The opening scene was, they've got the thunder and lightning going, they've got the operatic music playing as he gets shot, and he falls over and crashes into the glass table. It's a bit over the top, but
it fully commits to the bit for the rest of the episode.
It does that over the top thing with the flashbacks, where every time it cuts back to a version of the events and like revealing like conversation he had that day, they're always really blown out, lots of like gloom effects on the visuals.
Someone likes David Fincher movies.
The sound effects, the voices sound a bit echoey. They've got that kind of...
The very first time, it's from Lana's point of view, and she stood at the end of the hallway, and I thought the voices were echoey just because it was from her perspective, and it was really far, not really far away, but just to show there was some distance. And then they carried that effect on through every other flashback.
Yeah. So I do have a critique to point out
just
here. Just one. Well, there'll be more, but this is one sort of blanket one, which is once Jonathan's arrested and he's put in jail, and we'll talk about all the scenes that he has with Clark and Martha and his reasons for being upset with Lionel and all that. But there's a thing almost immediately when they're talking about, okay, we need an attorney. Almost immediately they go, hey, Lana, your stepdad, he's an attorney, and technically that's true. He used to be a defense lawyer, but he's only been teaching law and doing activism in the last, several years. It's been a while since he's actually done that. But they go and ask him, and he quite rightly says, well, I can recommend some people, but I'm not really in the game right now. He's actively not doing this anymore.
I think his words are, I'm not the right person for this.
Yes, which, again, he's not actively practicing defense law. That makes sense.
And even if he was, that doesn't necessarily make him the best man for this job. No.
And he's got like a sad backstory later when Lana asks him about it. And he's like, oh, I got...
Asks him about it or confronts him about it?
Confronts him about it, yes. Chloe does some digging and finds out that he's got that, for some reason he stopped being a lawyer after he had dealings with Lionel in the past. And it turns out that he was defending someone, but he was like an appointed attorney. He wasn't like someone who was, hired. He was appointed by the state and didn't give a shit, and the guy ended up getting executed, and it turned out he was innocent after. So he's felt guilty about that, and that's why he doesn't practice defense law anymore, because he'll get people killed with how much of a shit lawyer he is. That's the whole thing. And Lana and him
just care.
But Lana and him have this big fight about it, and she's like, hey, you have to be honest with me, you're my dad. And he's like, we've known each other for like 3 weeks. You came into my life. We're not ready to have these big conversations. Baby steps, right? That's not the exact words he says. I'm just injecting my own into it a little bit, but it's
definitely what he means, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of on his side in this scene. Like, how dare she confront him with hey, you didn't tell me about this big dramatic thing in your past? Well, because he's only known you for a few weeks, and they're just getting to know each other. I know he's technically your father, but you kind of have to build up to that a little bit.
And it's like a pivotal moment in his life.
It's not like, once they've decided, oh, hey, we're going to be father and daughter now. That's like, okay, here's a list. I've got a book. I'm going to open it and start just telling you every dramatic thing, everything that's ever happened to him that's important. I'm going to tell you them all right now. TV shows. No, it is not.
Oh, no, because they have to pull them out for dramatic moments like this. You're right.
So I was kind of on Henry's side here. I think he was right to be a bit miffed at these weird, dramatic ultimatums that he was being given.
I am as well, but the show definitely played it like Lana was right.
Yeah. So the show's just wrong in this case. But anyway, all comes boiling down to him actually ultimately agreeing, because Lana meets with him again and says, hey, you can't just race from your past. Like, you have to accept them. You have to blah, blah, blah. And you have to stand up to them. You know, and then next time we see him, he's at the police station. He's like, I'm going to take your dad's case, Clark. And he shakes Clark's hand and he's like, I'm going to go and speak to him right now. My critique that I've been building up to for this last couple of minutes is that this is all irrelevant, because this is the last we see of this plot line, because after this we just end the episode with solving who the actual murderer is, and the whole quest to get Jonathan an attorney didn't matter. Like, it wasn't important.
The real answer is, as to why this exists, is they paid the actor who plays Henry Small a fee for a certain amount of episodes. And they're like, shit, we need to work him into this one somehow.
Like, they solved the crime within like 48 hours of it happening. So, like, don't get me wrong, he would need an attorney. They'd be looking for an attorney. But as far as actually spending time on it in this episode, it does just feel like a waste of time, because we're not actually going to get to a point where he actually like, we don't even get one scene where he like uses his political, or not his political, sorry, his legal, yes, his legal know-how to talk to Jonathan and like point out, like, you know, where things might.
There's no, my client doesn't answer this.
There's no like, oh, he's going to help solve the case by pointing things out. The only thing he does is point out how the other alibis are shaky or whatever, and that's all he ever says.
Doesn't even say objection at any point.
Well, there's never a scene in a courtroom. Lawyers don't just go around saying objection randomly, Connor.
I don't believe that. My entire reality depends on lawyers going around saying objection at least once a day.
The judges just walk around going sustained?
Yes.
Or overruled, I suppose. 50-50.
Yeah, depending on the situation. They have to do at least one of those.
Yeah, I got to the end and realized that it never, like, obviously he kind of has an arc because he chooses to take the case, so that is that he's gotten over his thing, but it just feels really weird because it doesn't actually have any consequence on why they're, like, they never actually need him. It turns out he was unnecessary the entire time.
No, my favorite part of this is the whole reason that they used him was, oh, wait, Martha's dad's a lawyer. We set that up about 6 episodes ago. We can use that. And then went, oh no, he hates Jonathan. Actually, do you know what? It's fine. We've already got a guest star that we're paying for recurring things anyway that's a lawyer. We'll just use him. And then they wrote that in. They were like, yeah, we're fine. Don't worry about it.
So I want to get that out of the way. I think, and I was saying this a lot as we were watching it towards the end, but, you know, the whole thing where Clark sets up a trap for the real killer to come in and try and like finish the job in Lionel, because they sort of like intentionally spread that Lionel's getting better and he's going to come out of his coma, which he actually does at the end of the episode. He seems fine other than the neck brace. It's
intentionally spreading it, but it is true, I think.
The way Clark said it made it sound like it wasn't actually true yet. It just happens that...
No, the first time he says it, it's not to people that he thinks are going to spread it. I don't think he's like, oh no, okay, Lionel's getting better. So I do think it is... I think they believe it anyway.
Regardless, he set this trap, right? And then, to be fair, I was genuinely surprised at who the killer was. It wasn't any of the people they set up. It was the sheriff, who's been a recurring character.
Sheriff Ethan.
For a season and a half, he's been around. So actually, it felt like a big deal, as big as it can do, because it's a character who's not just been introduced this episode. Unlike Dominic, who we'll talk about in a while.
Dominic.
So, you know, he comes in, he shoots the bed, and it's just pillows, and Clark turns on the light, and he's got a camera videoing this, so he's got evidence that Sheriff Ethan's behind all this.
He turns the camera off before Ethan confesses, which was a bit weird. Like, don't get me wrong, he's got footage of Ethan trying to shoot what he thinks is Lionel, which I'm sure helps. But why did he turn it off? Unless he was scared Ethan was going to shoot him and there'd be footage of him on there.
Well, he's not really scared of that, but obviously, he's scared about it only in the sense that it would reveal that he's bulletproof.
That's what I meant for the camera. Not scared of being shot, but scared of being on camera.
But here's my thing. I'm just imagining the scenario, because this, like, the way they play this is like the scenes we get after this, everything's all solved, like everything's dropped. That's it. The episode's tied up in a neat bow, right? As far as the murder plot goes, and like Jonathan being arrested for murder. And all I can imagine is Clark getting out of the police station with this camera and saying, I set up a sting operation. Here's the evidence that Sheriff Ethan, who he's probably like done a citizen's arrest. He's leading him out of the police station. He's like, I've arrested the sheriff. Here's the evidence that he's the murderer. And I'm just imagining, I wish they did this scene. I want to see the reaction of the other cops as Clark is handing this in and gift wrapping him the case. It's so surreal, especially as you pointed out this episode, that technically Clark might have been 14 at the start of season 1, meaning that he is at most early 16 here, if not still 15.
Yeah, this will come about because as we're recording this, yesterday was 22 years since this show started, which is kind of horrific to think about.
There's people who were born the year Smallville started
who are younger than this show
who can now drink in the US, which is upsetting to think about.
Yeah, I work with people who are 6 years younger than this show. That's horrific.
Oh dear. Yeah.
But the tweet that kind of said all this stated that Clark was 14. Did some digging because that seems suspicious.
Oh yeah, and like I have a hard time believing he's meant to be 16 in season 1. 14 is laughable.
So what, the first time I actually saw this was a quote tweet alongside the original one, with Clark at 14 in this show, and then Bruce Wayne in Gotham
at 14.
At 13.
Okay, 13.
At 13, admittedly. But yeah, it also has a flashback. At some point in the show, there's a flashback to Clark at 13, and oh boy, he looks a lot younger than Tom Welling.
Well, Tom Welling
looks suspiciously like a 13-year-old.
Tom Welling was well into his 20s. I think if I remember correctly, Tom Welling was actually in his later 20s when they started this show. I
mean, that is easily verifiable, isn't it?
Yeah, you can check that.
Tom Welling age.
Like I seem to remember back when, like, you know, the extras were doing the rounds when the DVDs were coming out, that he was like he was older than the rest of the cast.
Look, I've had a couple of drinks, so can you do some maths for me? Tom Welling was born in 1977.
77. He'd have been about 25 when it debuted.
Okay, so it was about a decade.
Well, maybe 24. Maybe 24 actually, 24. But still.
Well, hang on. Given that when I did my research online, because I did my due diligence, it said he was 14 or 15 in the first season. That tracks with Tom Welling. Being a decade, give or take, older. He was 24 or 25 in 2001.
Okay, what do you mean it tracks exactly?
Well, yeah, that tracks with him being a decade older, give or take, with 14 or 15.
But what's your point though? Why is it relevant that he's a decade older than the age he's supposed to be playing?
You said 24 or 25, so it tracks with that. He's a decade older, ish.
Look, I know they often get like a 20, 21-year-old to play like a teenager, and they try and get away with it. Obviously, it's better when they go as long as they can without getting into kid range, meaning 18. You know, and that's what they did. You know, like Sarah Michelle Gellar in the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was 18 when they started Buffy, right?
Was she only 18?
She was 18 at the start of that show, yeah.
Well, fair enough. I can almost respect that as being as low as possible. Like, within reason.
You can go lower, obviously. It's just that there's a lot of rules about filming with underage actors.
Okay. As low as possible, that I understand why they would only want to go to 18, because it's a lot easier for them, right?
Yeah, and I think, out of that cast, I think Willow or Allison Hannigan was roughly the same age. I think Nicholas Brendan was a little older, and then Angel was a little bit older again, but he was meant to be older anyway, so it didn't really matter.
That does make sense. He should be older.
He should be, but at the same time, he was meant to be turned into a vampire when he was like 18, so it's like, whatever.
But even with that knowledge, visually, he should look older than them in that first season. Sure,
yeah, absolutely. And Giles is meant to be a middle-aged man anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Which he is.
Yes, he is. It's perfect. And then in this show, like, I think some of the actors are a bit closer to the age they're supposed to be. Obviously, they're all older. But, I think already being 24 when you're meant to be playing 15.
I wonder what the age difference between Welling and Rosenbaum is.
I thought you were going to say Kreuk. I'd be more curious as to how much closer Kreuk is to the age of Lana.
Rosenbaum are like him and Lex are like best friends. Rosenbaum's 5 years older.
Which I think that kind of tracks with what there might have been. Well, actually, I was thinking Clark was starting out about 16, and even then I thought that was a stretch. But this is the point though, is that even if you're saying 15, I think 15 is hard to believe, which 14 is absurd. Like, there is no way to believe that any of these characters are 14 in season 1. Not a chance.
Kristin Kreuk was born in 82, which makes her what, 5 years younger?
Yeah, so she'd have been 19. So that sounds reasonable. That sounds more normal for a TV.
That sounds reasonable for high school casting on a TV show. Yeah.
Yeah, to start with, obviously by the time you finish the high school years, she'll be older, but you can't help that.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a little bit better nowadays that they do tend to cast younger. I think it's just more that people bullied them too much into doing it. But I do understand why they cast 18 to 19-year-olds as high schoolers, because of the ease of working with adults as opposed to children in terms of just legal restrictions, not talent, but also, just legal restrictions.
Also, on a cynical note, I think there's no guilt about sexualizing them, even though it's technically still a bit shady because they're supposed to be underage.
Oh, man, remember the episode, I think it was last season, where Lana was coming out of the pool and it did all the slow-mo shots like it was like Baywatch or something?
Yeah, and it's like she's meant to be like 15 here. It's like, like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I know she's not really. She's over 18. As an audience, you can kind of just go with it, but she's meant to be underage here. And not even just underage in America. Like, she's meant to be underage for UK age standards.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Which is
absurd. Which, don't get me wrong, I think the age in the UK should be raised to 18. Like, 16 is just kind of like...
Yeah, it's a weird thing in the UK where it's 16 to 18 is fine, but if you're over 18, then it's under 18 is weird. Like, yeah, like there's legal grey areas that make it convoluted.
Yeah, a 16-year-old and a 30-year-old shouldn't be mingling.
No.
Not under no circumstances. Just no. Anyway, we're off on a tangent about ages. But yes, obviously, they said when you looked into it, it said that he's either 14 or 15, depending on when his birthday is. Let's just assume 15, because even 15 is hard to swallow.
Yeah, that's best case. Let's say I don't know how American school systems work, but let's say he's a September birthday. He's a 15-year-old at the start of the year.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, well, I mean, even our school systems were different in terms of the ages.
Is true, yeah.
So, I mean, there's no telling.
For me, he was a September birth. It was a September 1st birthday. He's the oldest he can legally be in his school year. He's 15 as we start watching season 1. He's 16 right now.
Yeah, he'd be 16 by now. If he was 15 at the start of season 1, he'd be 16.
Yeah, he'd be well into 16 by now.
Yeah. Anywho.
16 and a half.
It makes all the times that he just goes in, like, I mean, obviously in this episode he walks into a bar and the guy's immediately, hey, we don't serve minors, but there's been episodes before where he goes into bars and gets served, and it makes it more absurd, because keep in mind there might be 21 to...
It was funny because I'd temporarily forgotten that, because as we were watching it I was like, hey, I got served in a bar when I was 15, because whatever, and you reminded me the age was 21, not 18. I was like, yeah, that is a big difference.
I'm just imagining Hot Fuzz. Like,
when's your birthday?
September 5th. What year? Every year.
Out.
Anyway. So the murder mystery thing, we get like basically we get a series of different versions of what happened. I mean, there is elements of it that are all true. Like, everyone had some kind of argument with Lionel, and those all seem to have happened. Jonathan did argue with him about giving Martha a watch, which, fair play, I did not expect them to actually bring that watch back up in a episode again, so fair enough.
That is true, but I'm also confused. All versions, except the final one, have Lionel doing his, you're just another employee now speech. You're just another employee. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And that doesn't track with Ethan.
He didn't say that to the shooter, though.
Or was that the one before?
He says that to Lex.
He says it to Lex, and he says it to someone else as well. It's in at least 2.
He may say it to the sheriff when he meets him in the last flashback, but I don't think he doesn't say it to the shooter though. So I don't think this tracks.
Oh, maybe.
So I think that's all right. But yeah, like everyone has some kind of meeting with Lionel before he killed him, or before he was attempted to be killed. Jonathan's mad about the watch. Lex is mad because Lionel's like sneakily bought all the shares of LexCorp, so now LexCorp belongs to Lionel.
I'd be mad about that too.
Yeah, he's very pissed about it. Dominic's upset because Lex is being treated like he's the next.
Dominic's basically been written out of the will.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing about this though: is who the hell is Dominic? He's never been brought up before. It's just all of a sudden, Lionel's got this like surrogate son that he's grooming to be the next
English accent.
Yeah, he's grooming him to be the next like guy who runs Luther Corp, but then he's mad that Lex is still been given chances, and it's like, okay, here's just another suspect, I guess.
Lionel's definitely just grooming him to make Lex jealous.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Also, this guy is the most like 2002 guy. He's got this little 2002 goatee. It's very thin trimmed. He's got the hair. He's very...
Okay, I don't think you ever watched NCIS
no,
at all. Not even a single episode.
not a chance.
But he reminds me of the character. I want to say his name was Jimmy. In that, not Jimmy Olsen, obviously.
No one was assuming you meant Jimmy Olsen on NCIS.
I know, but we're talking about Smallville, so maybe they were talking. You know, I said Jimmy Smallville. Yeah, maybe. Not him. I'm pretty sure his name's like. See, now in my head his name is Jimmy McGee, but that can't be right. Because
Why does it matter? What does it matter what he's doing?
No way any TV show in the world named their character Jimmy McGee. Surely not. But also, yeah, he reminded me exactly of him, but with an English accent.
Mm. Yeah,
his name was Timothy McGee, which is nearly as bad.
All right, so that was that. So what's the whole thing with the sheriff though? Is that okay? So the sheriff was blackmailed by Lionel, and it felt like he was owned by Lionel now after he.
But he did take some money for
He took money to give him intel on people that worked at LexCorp, so that Lionel could blackmail them for their shares. Right, fair enough. But they felt owned by Lionel because Lionel had all this leverage on him, and he's like, no, this is the start of a friendship. I'm going to be coming to you for tons of stuff now. And he's even like, part of my favorite moment of the whole episode is Lionel getting like, passive aggressive threatening, where he's like, Sheriff, that's a elected position, isn't it? And he's just kind of tapping his chin as he says it, and I'm like, oh, Lionel, you scumbag.
Honestly, my favorite bits of the show when Lionel and or Lex are terrible, terrible people and just play into it.
That was another great example with Lionel at the end, actually. We'll get to that. But so here's the thing. So Sheriff Ethan, because of this, killed Lex, and he framed Jonathan because he knew Jonathan would have enough of a motive to look guilty. So he set up that Jonathan had a gun, which Jonathan didn't have a gun, but he gave him a gun, he gave him the booze, all the rest of it, right? The part that kind of doesn't quite add up to me is that Ethan's doing this to protect himself and get rid of the looters because he sees it as the right thing to do, to get rid of the looters, right? And he still like murders his friend, the bartender, in cold blood to cover his tracks. That doesn't strike me as the actions of a man who's doing something that he thinks is just. That strikes me as someone who is actually more of a vicious killer.
While I do agree, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for the sake of it.
Yes, so go on.
Clark's already gone and roughed up the bartender, and now Ethan is terrified that he's going to be ratted out. So he's not doing it as a cold-blooded killer. He's doing it to just be like, oh shit, I'm screwed here.
It's the way he acted when he got caught versus when I remembered, oh wait, but you also killed the guy who was meant to be your friend from high school that was helping you do all this, which was the bartender.
I assume that off-screen, the bartender went and told Ethan what had happened after Clark had roughed him up and been like, they're onto us.
Yeah.
And Ethan's like, well, shit, I can't have this, and killed him to protect himself. That's my assumption. It wasn't necessarily cold-blooded. It was more out of fear.
Yeah, he just didn't come across as, I don't know, like...
Why am I defending this show?
Yeah, it didn't feel like that was even like in his head when he was acting at the end. Like, I don't know, it's like maybe that's a weird complaint, but it didn't feel like it was even factoring into his performance.
Are you criticizing the actor or the director?
Probably the writing more than anything. Just the idea that it's just kind of ignoring that part even happened, and we feel like we're just talking about Lionel's attempted murder instead of the fact that he actually killed someone he knew and someone he liked by all accounts. So, you know, I just thought that was worth mentioning.
I will give the show the minorest bit of credit in that we were surprised that it was Ethan.
Oh, that's fair. I was surprised.
And that, like, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing that the episode didn't set up that it even could possibly have been Ethan, but more just Ethan's been such a recurring character. He's been friendly with the Kents a long time. We knew they went to school together, and we knew they had this relationship.
I think
right?
That's why it worked as a shock, and I think that's why it's okay they didn't like give you a hint that it was him earlier on. I think that just his explanation, or his like, it's not even just his explanation. I think it's actually just the murder of his friend just sticks out like a sore thumb. That doesn't feel that, and also the fact that he tries to assassinate Clark for looking into things, because he tries to blow up the car that Clark and Peter are in, and Clark
with some horrific CG footage of the bullet going into the car,
slow motion.
Yeah, that was rough. Like, there was a few slow motion shots in this, but the last one was particularly awful.
Yeah, obviously Clark just grabs Pete and shields him from the blast. I do think though it's a bit silly that the back of his jacket and stuff is just a little bit tattered. Where I'm like, no, it should be gone. He should be walking around with his bare ass cheeks out. The back of his clothes should all just be incinerated.
I mean, that said, if we're pulling up stupid shit that the show should do, I'm pretty sure a car doesn't explode if you shoot it with a bullet. So you know.
Okay, I'm really giving it the benefit of the doubt here. But there is types of ammunition that will incinerate on impact, and that could potentially ignite the fuel. Admittedly, I'm giving the show a lot here.
You really are.
I'm giving it a lot.
Okay, I'll go with it for the sake of this show having some very, very passable level of continuity.
Look, and honestly, I wouldn't even be convinced that was a real thing, and it may still not be, but it's not just video games I've seen this in now. John Wick 4 has flame rounds in one scene, so I believe it exists.
Incendiary rounds are a real thing.
Yeah, okay. I figured they were, but
this bullet was not on fire when it entered that car.
I don't know when they go on fire. Did they go on fire mid-flight? Are they on fire? Did they detonate once they hit their target? I don't know. How did it work?
Good question.
I actually have no idea. Yeah. So anyway, I think the attempted assassination of Clark and Pete and the killing of his friend, I think those stick out as like trying to make like the killer feel really dangerous. But when you find out it's Ethan, I think his reason for trying to kill Lionel makes sense, and I think the shock of it being him works actually quite well, shockingly well for this show. It's just that those other things he does in the middle to cover his tracks feel like too calculated and malicious versus who he actually is. Those are the parts that feel wrong. It's not really anything he says or does at the end. It's those parts that feel that
the
stick
other
out.
bits feel like the act of a hired hitman.
Yes.
Not Ethan.
Yeah, absolutely. So they feel a bit weird to me. But like I said, like all the conversations that Lionel has with everyone are real. The parts that are fake, of course, are just the moments where you see them holding the gun, which is particularly more extended for Jonathan, because we go through a part of the episode where he's the only suspect. So we get a whole scene where he gets out in the rain and he cocks the gun and he's like...
It's so dramatic. I love it.
The slow motion rain's like beating down around him and he's like, I've done with these Luthers. He gave my wife a watch. I'm going to give him a bullet.
While I hate it, I love it.
Yeah, and of course they all get kind of awkward because they're like, oh wait, he had a fight with Lionel. Oh, that looks bad. Oh, what's this watch we found? It looks like Jonathan found a gift that Lionel gave to you. Oh, that's awkward.
This looks bad.
Yeah. And Jonathan's beating himself up. He's like, I shouldn't let my anger get to me. No jury in the world will not convict me because I've made it clear how much I hate the prick. So
yeah, I love that the bartender was like, yeah, Jonathan kind of had an anger problem, and okay, he was in on it, but he's not wrong.
That's why
we've seen Jonathan have an anger problem repeatedly.
Well, that's why he's the good patsy for this, because he's convincing because of how everyone knows how he feels. And maybe
Clark grabs the bartender.
Yeah, he grabs the bartender in a moment of anger, and I don't know if this has come up yet. Jonathan giving him the speech about how he can't lose his temper because for Clark it's important that he doesn't, because he can cause so much damage if he does.
I think it has, and Clark's been like, "But you lose your temper."
Yeah,
and John's like, "Yeah, but you can't."
Yeah, and that's a fine learning moment. But I think the Jonathan thing specifically in this episode is the more interesting one, because I get why Clark's losing his temper a bit and P has to talk him down, whatever. But I think Jonathan saying that he feels like he looks so guilty because of how he lets his anger go on show all the time, I actually think this is dare I say, a decent little lesson for Clark about why he has to maintain a friendly, positive, outgoing presence the entire time. It's the idea that not that he'll ever necessarily be accused of murdering someone because he lets everyone know that he thinks someone's a dick, but it's the idea of the importance of not letting those things show and try to see the best in people and putting a positive force. I don't know, there's something kind of there.
There is, and I think it shows why Jonathan is probably the best character on the show. At least the most well-written.
I think that's fair, yeah.
I think he's a very flawed individual. But I think that's why he's so good, right? And part of that Schneider's acting as well. He's a very good actor. And he's amongst the best in the show. We spoiled that already.
It's just that he tries to teach Clark good lessons, but also his flaws become teaching moments for Clark as well. When he
tries to teach Clark to be better than him.
Yeah, so they all work and they all make sense, and maybe it's just the easier thing to do, given everything else that they screw up on this show, but it does tend to be the stuff that works the best. That said, Lionel being an evil, slimy prick does work quite well too, and I love how at the end, when he's lying in the hospital bed and Lex comes to see him, and Lex has pointed out to Clark at this point, who, by the way, he goes back and forth. The first time he sees Clark after they think Jonathan's done it, he gives Clark the cold shoulder, but then later on he's like, nah, you know what, I'm convinced it wasn't your dad. I think it was that little prick Dominic.
It's fine, because when he thought it was his dad, he was in his shirt, and then he changed it to a t-shirt and he relaxed. He was like, do you know what, it was Dominic the whole time. It was all about his costume.
I'm just saying, they get to each other's throats quite quickly, and as you pointed out as we were watching, this show is going to have them break up as friends so many times that it's going to be meaningless in a very quick span of time.
2 seasons time?
Well,
maybe 3.
I don't want to spoil it, but I remember there'd been something in early season 4 where it's impossible that Clark should ever even remotely trust Lex again. And when we get to it, we'll talk about it, but I'm just it's going to be a thing.
It's been a long time since I watched this show. Thank God.
I just remember I just remember a specific scene in the context of it.
I probably know the exact scene you're talking about. I just don't remember this at the start of season 4.
Anyway, so Lionel's lying there. Lex comes in and he's like, "Hey, there was 4 viable suspects for your murder, including me. How does that make you feel?" And Lionel turns it into blaming Lex. He's like, Lex, this is actually your fault because you made your employees so stubborn. I had to go to all these extreme lengths to get them to sell your shares. And this is such a warped gaslighting logic. It is unbelievably evil. And then there's a pause as Lex contemplates the absurd thing that he's just heard coming out of Lionel's mouth. And then Lionel, actually, you know what? This is my favorite moment of the episode. I lied earlier. This is my favorite moment. Lionel, after a pause, Lex doesn't say a word. He's just thinking about what he just said. And Lionel just says, "I forgive you, Lex." That's it. That's your... If this show never deserved an Emmy, not even close, but if it was ever going to get one, it's for that line. It's for that line of dialogue.
This is why I love this show. I hate this show, but I love this show because of these moments. Because Lex, Lionel, Martha, and Jonathan are the only good characters. The only characters worth watching. And all of them are so overdone as well, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But all of them are the best fun to watch. And maybe that's just because they're the best 4 actors on the show. I don't know. Maybe they're the best written, but maybe they're just the best acted.
That's a good chat. Actually, as much as I was saying, hey, I'll give it a little props for actually having the watch from last episode lead to something in this episode, we do also have to mention the last episode ended with the Kents all saying, hey, Martha should stay employed with Lionel to keep an eye on what he's doing, specifically in relation to, his
episode.
his snooping around Clark. And this episode opens with Lionel just casually saying, "Oh yeah, Martha's not working for me anymore." And I'm like, wait, why?
In the show's barest defense, it is Lionel saying, "I assume Martha's not working for me anymore."
He doesn't say assume.
He does. He says, "I don't think Martha will be joining me." He's not certain. I guarantee you he's not certain. He says, "I don't think."
He says she's not in my employment anymore. I don't think...
No, she says, "I don't think Martha Kent will be in my employment anymore."
I'm going to check this after the fact. I don't think he said I think.
I promise you go watch it, and we can record a little add-in.
I will check it. Right. I will check it after. I'm pretty sure he didn't say I think. But as for the rest of the episode, though, that plan... I understand why they don't talk about it, because they're kind of busy with the whole murder.
But it's irrelevant, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, I don't expect her to still be working for him next episode.
Probably not.
Just a sneaking feeling. He's going to be recuperating, though. I'm just like, when the hell is this whole blind thing ending? Because it definitely ends. He's going to have sight again, at least by the start of next season.
I have do you know what? I didn't have it until this episode. I have a vague memory of them saying it's after this coma that he regained his sight.
Okay. All right.
Like, so it's somewhere after this that, like, obviously it's somewhere after this, because we see at the start of the episode very clearly establishes he's still blind because he's using the text to voice reader.
Yes. Also, yes, everyone keeps saying maybe when he wakes up he can identify the killer. And it's not until Lana's new dad says, but that's kind of a big if because he is blind after all.
Yeah, we've been saying it for like three or four times at this point. Admittedly, we have the hindsight of we've seen the moment that he's shot, unlike everyone else, and there is no dialogue from the other person.
Yeah, it could be anyone as far as Lionel's concerned, but yeah.
But as far as the other people are concerned, maybe the other guy said something and Lionel could identify them, I suppose.
Hmm.
But also, yeah, the man's blind.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay, well, it comes up. I mean, that's basically it. I don't know what we've glossed though. I mean, maybe, when Clark... So there's two scenes in this episode where Clark goes to investigate crime scenes that the police have already looked at. The first one is where they found his dad, and he uses his x-ray vision to find a bullet in the shed that's nearby. And this explains why Jonathan has gunpowder residue on his hand. It's because the killer put the gun in his hand and made him shoot it. Sure, whatever. And it happens a second time when he goes back to the bar, and they're looking for the bartender who's now missing, and they're trying to find him, and he uses x-ray vision, although I noticed this time they didn't bother paying for the effect. They just had him react as if he sees something, and he goes over to a freezer, and the only reason...
I know they didn't pay for the effect, but in some ways I appreciate they don't always feel the need to show it. They just... Tom Welling has that little squint that shows us that he's using it, and that's good enough sometimes.
The only reason I'm bringing up this scene, though, is because I wanted to mention that when he goes to open this freezer, which has the dead body of the bartender in it, is that for some reason, and I have never seen this in my life, but you know how, in fact, now I'm thinking about it, only fridges have lights in them. I don't think I've ever seen a freezer have a light in it, but regardless, this freezer has a light in it, right? When he opens the door, this light turns on. But what really stuck out, and it's especially confusing in Smallville, is that this light is green. So he opens this freezer, and there's this green light hits him. So what would you naturally think I'm assuming here for a split second before I notice that Clark's not reacting to anything, is I'm thinking, why is there kryptonite in this freezer?
Wrong. You were thinking, why is it reflecting my jumper?
Shut up. Like, of all the colours to have this freezer, like, have a light glow coming out of it, they pick
I
green.
would say, one, I have seen freezers have a light in them, but specifically it's only these open top freezers like this.
These
like
bigger industrial ones, okay.
Yeah, because I've known middle class people that have these freezers in their garage, like to store extra drinks in and stuff like that.
How the upper class live.
I know. One of my best friends. But genuinely, yeah, they had like fridges and freezers like this in the garage. And that did have lights.
Okay.
But two, almost all cases I've ever known of a freezer or a fridge like this to have a light in, it's blue. Like a bluey white, but a blue tint, if anything.
Yeah, I would say white, but I could buy a slightly blue tint just because fluorescent is slightly blue tinted.
Yeah.
Well, at least compared to tungsten lights anyway.
Yeah.
Which are a little bit
But it's
more
always
orange.
bluey, never green.
Yeah. Bit of trivia or an interesting fact for you. The color temperature of lights is actually the opposite of what you think it is. The warmer the light is, the more blue it is, and vice versa.
It's why blue LEDs were so hard to create. The people who created blue LEDs was only in the 90s, and they got a Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah. I just know that because I had to learn how to light things when I was doing television production at university. And we had to do color temperatures for the sake of, lighting things.
I mean, it's kind of important when you're doing things like that.
Yeah, well, it's the sort of thing where you have to kind of match it to, like, if there's daylight coming in the window, you have to get your lights to match it, so you have to be aware of what, a certain time of day is, color temperature-wise, and so on. But
kind of important for doing that, yeah.
Yes. But it's the opposite, because blue is cold, orange is hot. Like, that's what everything else on the planet teaches you those colors mean those things. But when you're talking about color temperature of lights, it's the opposite. Anyway, no one cares probably, but I thought I'd mention it since we were talking about the slightly blue glow of a light.
We've been speaking for
do you know
5 minutes on Smallville?
Do you know
Who cares at this point?
Do you know what color naturally does not come from any light source unless you specifically tint it?
Is it green?
Green does not naturally come from light unless it's kryptonite, apparently.
Hey, that isn't naturally emitting the light. That's reflecting the light or refracting the light. I don't know which one. Pick one.
I don't know. I didn't do physics. I just learned what was relevant for lighting stuff. Okay?
I'm pretty sure it depends which side of the rock you stood on. If you're holding the rock in front of you and looking at it, it's reflecting. If it's coming through it and you're looking at it from the other side, it's refracting.
Okay, we're
Either
done.
way, it's green.
I think we're done. Okay, that's been the review of Smallville. Suspect. Everyone's
the best episode of the season.
Which is not saying it's a good episode of TV by any stretch. It's just got more things in it that were actually entertaining and not in a so bad it's funny way that it kind of sticks out as being better than the rest of the season so far.
Yeah, it did have some so bad it's funny.
Oh, I had a little bit. I'm not saying there was none of it.
No, this is Smallville after all.
But this is probably like a 6 out of 10.
I might agree with that.
I think it's maybe scraping a 6, which is good for Smallville.
Which is usually around a 3 or 4.
Sometimes it goes lower than that as well.
It does, yeah.
So that is Suspect. Let's see what's coming next time on Smallville, shall we? Episode 14 is called Rush. During a rave party,
I'm in.
Underground cave.
Oh, I'm so in.
Which this description on IMDb gets really specific. It says, discovered by the Indian descendant Kyla Willowbrook, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure she's not going to be back again. I think it's just mentioning that
Didn't she die?
I think so, yeah. So it's just mentioning the backstory to it. Like, I'm sure that's not going to be that relevant, but anyway.
Wait, hang on. The cave wasn't discovered by her. They were there, and she was exploring it while Clark fell into it, but she didn't discover it.
That's true. But that's what this description saying. Anyway, a student named Travis is reckless and climbs a lamp tower and dies. And then Pete is infected with a parasite from the cave and becomes reckless and bold. So Pete's on red kryptonite, basically.
Okay, got it.
That's the premise.
Good enough.
Dear. Okay. I'm not looking forward to this one, to be honest.
No. But are you looking forward to any episode of Smallville?
No, but there's neutral and then there's actively this sounds like it's going to be worse than normal, and this feels like it's pivoting into that territory.
That's fair, yeah.
So, let us know what you thought of this episode of Smallville in the comments. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You get bonuses like monthly reviews of Columbo, which I've, by the time this goes out publicly, I'll be several months into, but I've done 2 so far at the time of recording. And you get early access to a few things, including these Smallville reviews. In fact, by the time this goes out publicly, we're probably on season 3 on Patreon, so go check out that. But that is the show. Thank you very much for joining. Keep watching TV and won't somebody save me? That's what Lionel should have screamed as he was falling to the over the railing to the glass
After
table.
the 2 gunshots.
He should be like, "Somebody save me!"
It definitely should have cut to the credits on that.